When you're in that thing of winning every race, each race, the pressure builds. You don't want to be that person that ends that streak because recovering it once it goes wrong is so difficult.
There's like not many sports with this level of drama.
I got this opportunity to go to the British Grand Prix and I saw the mechanics and I just said to myself, well, they're just normal mechanics. I can go and do that. There are very few opportunities in life where if you want change, you can grab it. And then I joined Red Bull at the start of 2015. We were a small F1 team. As a unit, we were like all in this groove and it was just so comfortable.
What is it like to work with Max?
I don't think I've ever met somebody that's so driven, but I think what was special about him is that we saw Max get the best out of us. When you've got a guy that you know if you give him the equipment and you do your job well, you know he's going to deliver.
Let's talk about the 2026 season.
This is a huge change for the sport and everybody working in it. Red Bull, for the first time in their history, they're going to be building their own engine.
Wow.
It's a huge undertaking to go against, seasoned car manufacturers in Mercedes, Ferrari, Audi.
Are there any teams that you think will struggle?
I think for me, it'll be the team that... So yeah, exciting time next year.
I'm so excited to have Calum Nicholas joining me for a special edition of The Line from our London studio. But before we speak with him, can you quickly subscribe to the channel? It lets us know you enjoy these episodes so we can bring more of them to you. Thank you for your support. Calum Nicholas, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's such an honor to speak to you today.
It's a real pleasure for me, always.
I've begun reading Life in the Pit Lane, and I have to say I don't know much about F1.
Yeah.
And you are working for Red Bull, and now you've kind of graduated. You're an ambassador, working kind of to promote the brand and educate folks on motorsport and just the beauty.
Yeah, for sure.
Is motorsport. So maybe just tell folks a little bit about your evolution and how you got to the place that you're at today.
Absolutely, yeah. So I started out as a motorsport mechanic in 2009. When I'd left school, just prior to that, I was a road car mechanic doing everyday cars, fixing people's old broken Renaults and stuff like that. And then when I got made redundant, I sort of said to myself, well, I want to go and have a career continuing to build cars. But I didn't know how I was going to go about that. And I got this opportunity to go to the British Grand Prix and I saw the mechanics there working before the race. And I just said to myself, well, they're just normal mechanics. I can go and do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I re-enrolled in college. And then I sort of started my journey from there as a motorsport mechanic, worked my way up.
How old were you at the time?
I was 20.
Okay.
So by the time I sort of went back to college, I was 20. And actually at the time, I was the oldest student that they had at the college, right? So because back then, you didn't have to finish A-levels in the UK. You could do your GCSEs and then go off and do whatever you wanted.
Okay.
So most of my peers at college were 16, 17. I was 20. I felt like this old man already. And then, yeah, that was how my journey began. I worked my way up sort of through lower formulas, got my first F1 job, which was sort of factory-based in 2011, then went racing.
What does factory-based mean?
So I was doing what we called a sub-assembly role. So all of the parts for a race car come back to the factory for servicing, build, and stuff like that. So it was essentially, that was the job. It was pretty much any aspect of the car that needed any sort of parts.
It could be just literally any...
Literally anything. So everything from wheel bearings and gearboxes to the guns that we use in the pit stops. We used to do those as well.
Because every time the driver gets in the car, every aspect of the car has to be perfect.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
There can't be any.
No, not really. A lot of it is obviously performance is one of the team's priorities, but also safety. Totally. You think you're going to send someone out in a race car doing 200 mile an hour. All of those parts,
there's responsibility.
Yeah, those parts, they have to be functioning to keep people safe. Not just the drivers, but people working around the track, spectators. These parts break, they can be a massive problem. So I did that for about 8 months, and then I went racing. I was the rear end mechanic for Jules Bianchi up until his crash in Japan, and then I joined Red Bull at the start of 2015. And again, it was a factory-based role. It was something that is something that anyone who wants to work in Formula One, that's pretty much the pathway that you'll follow at any F1 team, is that you'll take a factory-based role on and then work your way up to going traveling with the race team. So that's what I did. And then I spent 10 years traveling with the team as the senior power unit technician. So I used to look after all of our engine assemblies, cooling systems, all of those ancillary systems. And then it sort of started in 2018, 2019. I started building a social media following just because I was happy to speak about those career paths and what it's like to work in the sport, and giving fans a little bit of insight that they wouldn't get from the usual channels.
Yeah.
Obviously, between Formula One and all the businesses that operate in it is high stakes. So a lot of the media that you see is very controlled. And I sort of found a place where I could give like first-hand information of what it's really like to work in the pit lane. And we kept building that following up until the point where I was like, you know what, I feel like I can write a book. And I did, and my manager, Francesca, I'd literally had a passing conversation with Francesca saying, I've been doing a bit of writing. And she went away with it, and about a week later, she was like, I'd like you to meet Oscar. He's a great literary agent. And I was like, okay,
You're like,
brilliant.
have an agent.
Yeah. And then literally, it was like 2 weeks later, they messaged me and said, right, I need you for this whole Saturday. We've set up a load of meetings with publishers. But I was sitting in these meetings thinking, I better write this book. If we're gonna sell it, I better start writing it. So then from that point onwards, it was just a case of, right, let's get the book together. We published that at the beginning of this year. And then just before pre-season testing was due to start this year, Red Bull approached me and they said, look, Cal, we're looking for an ambassador. I know you've been moving into this space. Is it something you'd be interested in? I thought to myself that there are very few opportunities in life where if you want change, you can grab it, right?
Yeah. What's the change that you want to see?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me was that I'd been in that role so long, and I love racing. I love the sport.
Yeah.
And I saw that this new role would give me an opportunity to see way more of it. You know, when you're in a race team, you're very much just focused on what you're doing.
Yeah, like your individual task.
Exactly. It takes up all of it. You know, it's all consuming. So you really don't have time. And I remember actually the Red Bull's last sporting director, Jonathan Wheatley, when he was with the team, I remember sitting down with Jonathan last year and him saying to me, Cal, you know, you really need to decide what you want to do. Because, you know, at the moment you're doing all this media and the book and racing, and I don't think that you can juggle all at the same time. And at the time, I sort of said, I was like, no, I can do all of this.
You were offended?
Well, a little bit. I was kind of like, and to be fair, it took me a while to see what he was saying. Like, yeah, I could do all of it, but you're going to struggle to do all of it well.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that if I do something, I want to know that I'm doing it as well as it can be done. So when Red Bull offered me this opportunity in the new year, I was like, this is my chance to, you know, grab something and make a change in my life and spend a bit more time at home. That was a huge sort of, you know, factor for me. I've got a 6-year-old who missed her dad, you know, for her whole life. She's been, you know, missing her dad. So
you're on the road 200 days of the year.
That was it. Yeah. It was, you know, last year, I think it was like 196.
As a sleep and circadian physiology is reading just your travel schedule, I was like, whew, you know, like it gives me like anxiety. And
well, this is the thing as well. And then last year it was probably like even worse, because whereas normally I'd just plan to sleep on a flight. If I was on a flight, I'd just sleep.
Yeah.
But now I was on a flight and I was like, right, I've got 8 hours. I can get some writing done here. So then I was awake then and trying to do all this stuff. And after a while, I knew it was going to catch up to me anyway.
Yeah.
So it was a good opportunity for me to say, right, if this is your opportunity for change, grab it with both hands, you know, dive in and go for it.
I want to talk a little bit about your time at Marussia.
Yeah.
And, you know, you mentioned Jules.
Yeah.
You know, I think losing a teammate is, I guess I just want to understand what that must be like. And, you know, and I suppose there's a level of acceptance that that's part of the risk, you know, that everyone takes, but there's still... Yeah, I think that is hard to overcome. How did you overcome that?
Like you said, there is an acceptance that, you know, there's always this risk when you're doing something like motor racing. It was a hard one to swallow. You know, it always feels unjust.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what was I, 22, 23 at the time? It was just that thing of I built a race car and a guy went out in it and he lost his life. And it's one of those things that I know that it wasn't a problem with the race car. It wasn't a problem with anything I did. But ultimately, me and my car crew, you hold that kind of responsibility, which I think for me as a young 20-year-old, I think it was hard to take on at the time. And then also there was this thing of, you know, it's non-stop. You know, like we had that crash in Japan.
Yeah.
The sport doesn't stop for it. You know, we were straight off to Russia the next week. You didn't have time to even process it and take on the time. You're straight to the next race. And 2 days after that accident, I was back in the garage trying to build a car again.
Wow.
And you haven't really had any time to sort of process or any of that. So that was probably one of the most difficult parts about it. It was also, looking back at it now, it was also one of the things that helps me value what a team is. Yeah. Because I will say, like, as a unit, as a team, we were amazing. at supporting one another when, during that period. So, it takes a while to see those sort of things later on. But yeah, it was a difficult time.
I think that's like a really important thread. I think everyone is, when you're on a team, you want a team like that, where when things don't go well, you can rely on one another. And how do you think Marussia built that culture? Because that is not the default necessarily,
Yeah, I think one of it is that, and it's going to sound odd, we were a small F1 team. We only had like 200 odd people working for the team in total. And I always say this, I say one of the things where Red Bull succeeds is that they've created a culture of unity that you get in a small business. Right, which is really difficult when you've got 2,000 people on campus, right? But Marussia was very much like it. It was a small business. We were all very close, and I think that's obviously the biggest thing about that. And yeah, so it's great for me when I talk about my time at Red Bull and how we've sort of managed to create that same culture, but have this huge business, or 4 businesses operating on the campus. Is really difficult. But yeah, being a small team is part of that. Then there's always that thing of we are all here in the same boat, and that sort of understanding. And yeah, it was just a difficult time in life,
Do you feel like you had the opportunity to grieve?
I did.
After
I
the
did,
season?
but it wasn't until Marussia went into administration.
Okay.
Once we were all made redundant again, I spent a couple months sat at home, trying to find a new job. But yeah, I guess that was the time where you had to sort of take it all in and take stock of everything that had happened.
Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that.
No, I see. Like I say, it was a long time ago. There was some difficult things, and I think at the time as well, there were things that I was angry about. It wasn't just, I'm really sad that I've lost a friend and colleague. It was, there were still things at the time that I was still really angry about. So it took a moment.
What were you angry about?
Man, I felt at the time that we shouldn't have been racing in those conditions.
Rainy or
yeah. I mean, it was a really bad thunderstorm, one that we knew was coming as well. And throughout, and for the time that we were behind the safety car prior to Jules's accident, you had drivers on the radio saying, "What are we doing out here?" And then and I think the rules have changed now about medical assistance for drivers, because the rule used to be something like if you couldn't get to the hospital via helicopter, then you shouldn't be racing. So and that was something that we saw lots during that period, that even if it was just too foggy for a helicopter to fly, you couldn't be out on track.
Right. And it makes complete sense.
And Jules had to be taken to hospital by ambulance because the weather was so bad that the helicopter couldn't fly in. And as you will know, when you have a head injury, getting to the hospital is key. So I was angry about that. I was angry that we were racing in those conditions. And it took me a long time to get past that.
The rules have changed.
They have. Basically, if you can get to the hospital via road within 20 minutes, then I think it's okay.
So I want to talk about high pressure situations.
Let's do it.
This is like, we were talking off camera, this is a scenario that I've spent my life, thinking about, and I haven't done any research in the F1 space, but definitely think about, trauma surgeons, military operators, professional athletes, high stakes, high stress. I'd love to know, what does pressure mean to you?
Okay, so when I talk about the pressure, particularly in pit stops, is what people ask me of. I always say to myself that the pressure that I feel is only my own pressure, right? It's not like I think, if I do a bad job, I'm going to get in trouble from my bosses. It is entirely, it's internal to an extent. And then the other thing is I always just feel like I have a responsibility to my teammates. Yeah. Those same people that are out there in the pit lane with you, that is my only responsibility, for me to know that I did the best job I could do, and for me to know that I've represented my teammates well. So that's where all the pressure comes from. I guess it's a difficult one, because I think for me as well, like, I'm the personality where I will perform better in that high pressure situation than I will if I'm chilled out. I'm more inclined to sort of really push myself to the limit when I'm under those pressure situations than when I'm doing practice. Right. When I'm in practice, there's no stakes here, and it's obviously, it's really important to have this mindset of practice how you race. Yeah. But it never works like that, because the conditions are so entirely
it's hard to simulate that.
This is the thing, isn't it? It's like we always have that mindset of, in terms of everything that you can control, you want it to be the same as race day.
Yeah.
but how do you simulate thousands of fans watching you do what you do?
I mean, yeah, I know. And that's the thing, like that's what I think makes that such a unique quality, you know, so let's watch this clip and I'd love for you to react to it.
These were the old wheels as well. It makes
Really?
life look easy with those wheels.
Oh my God.
It weigh nearly twice as much now.
Do they really?
Yeah, I mean, when we changed to the 18-inch wheels, we added quite a lot of weight to them. I think the rears are like 23 kilos now. So it's quite a physical job.
Oh, wow.
This is it, yeah.
Okay.
And like, it looks like you're just throwing a wheel on it, but it is so precise.
Oh my God.
Like, if you don't get that wheel on square, it won't go on.
Oh my God. It's just like an orchestra of...
Yeah, that's it. It's like I always refer to it as our little dance.
Yeah. You were world class. Like, you were the best.
We did good. We had
until 2023.
Well,
I guess like that's when it's broken.
This is it. I mean, that's when the record's broken. I got to be honest, that the one we never focused on trying to break world records.
Yeah, totally.
It was never the goal. Always the goal in pit stops has been like consistency and it just feeling like a really comfortable rhythm.
Yeah.
And 2019, I think we broke the record. What was it, like 3 times in 4 races? And it was just because we were like, as a unit, we were like all in this groove, and it was just so comfortable. Like, the pit stop was fast at the end of it without looking at the time, but more than anything, it was just, it didn't feel harder to go fast. It just felt like the rhythm was just there.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I thought that's kind of like the paradox of like winning, is like focusing on winning isn't going to get you a win, it's like just like, and especially in this, just seems like everything, like every task is so, it's like every individual person has to be completely locked in on their like.
And like trying to go faster will ruin it.
Right.
Because everybody has to move in time. The thing that we've always say, and I say to people when I talk to them about pit stops or training people in pit stops, is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Yeah. Right, and this is something that sort of anyone that's done pit stops in any motorsport will have that same theory. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It's the rhythm that makes it quick, not trying to go quickly.
So how has McLaren? So they're currently the best team in F1.
I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
I mean, arguably yes, they have the fastest car right now.
Right now, okay. So let's show the McLaren clip.
This is going to be controversial.
Okay, good.
Is this the McLaren pit stop clip?
What's going on with Lando Norris here? What's going on with Lando Norris? A slow stop and it counts. A 5.9 second stop. And
Okay, so they had a really slow pit stop at Monza.
Yeah.
The advantage. Piastri's had access to the soft
yes.
The slow stop has cost Lando Norris track position. Through goes Oscar Piastri.
So that was just an example of what was apparently a slow pit stop. What are the implications of, just not being fast enough in that scenario?
Look, in that particular example, McLaren were quite lucky in that it really only impacted within the team. And they were able, whether you like it or not, they were able to rectify it out on circuit. I think the impacts of a bad pit stop, they can be severe, right? Like, we've had bad stops that we've got really lucky with. So I think one of them that I think of is Austin. I think it was 2021 in Austin, in that really tight season where we had a slow pit stop. It was about 10 seconds.
Wow. And the average pit stop is?
Well, hopefully 2.
Like under,
I think that as a goal, as a target, I think as a pit crew, you set yourself a target of somewhere around 2.3, 2.4 seconds. Right? When it goes really wrong, like we ended up that year with a 10-second stop, and I always look back at that one as one that we learned the easy way. Obviously we had a bad stop, we learned why it went wrong, and luckily in that race, Max was able to overcome it and still go on and win the race. Right? That's not always going to be the case, and I think part of it is the acceptance that that's not always going to be the case. The other thing, there's so many things that can go wrong, right? So when we talk about the precision, it's not just the people performing the pit stop, it's also the driver.
Yeah.
Right? The first thing that can go wrong in a pit stop is that the car doesn't stop in the right place. That's the first thing that can cost you time. And it can be, like, honestly, it can be by 100 millimeters. that car doesn't stop in the right place. When you're doing the wheel gun,
They come in so fast.
I know, right? So you 60 kilometers an hour, and then you've got to stop it in the box that is just as wide as a car, right? It's a huge skill in itself. But from a pit stop perspective, me doing the wheel gun, if that car goes, 100 mil too long or 100 mil too short, that already costs me half a second, because I have to readjust from where I'm expecting it to where it is.
And you're talking 2.3 seconds, 2.4.
And this is it. So when you think of that half a second as a percentage of that 2.5 is massive, right?
Yeah.
Look, I think it's one of those things you can't go into it thinking, oh, if this goes wrong, it's going to cost us a race, because that's
it's going to cost you the race.
Exactly when it's going to cost you the race,
Yeah.
And it's difficult as well. The equipment's so complicated now. It's not like, when I started doing pit stops, you undid the wheel, you smashed the gun against your leg for it to swap directions, and then you just did the wheel up again, and then it was your judgment how tight it was, and you'd send the car. Like now we have these guns
Those calibrated.
Sensor-laden guns. They've got 3 or 4 sensors in them, a system that automatically switches the gun direction. So you have to be on top of that and know that you're going the right way, and then a system of lights and timings and a button to confirm. There's so many more elements to operating that gun, and so there's obviously way more things that can go wrong in it. So even when you're in a situation where there can be no human error whatsoever, and you can just have an equipment failure.
Yeah.
Red Bull had a couple at the beginning of the season where it was purely equipment errors. It wasn't user error, but as the user, you will always feel this.
That responsibility.
And the guilt afterwards. And there's absolutely nothing that you could have done to affect the outcome of that pit stop. That equipment was always going to fail,
Yeah.
So it's a really difficult thing, and that's why I always say that it's the mentality is the toughest part of it.
Yeah.
If you're trained well enough, the motor skill is easy.
Right. It just happens.
Naturally. So for me personally, is always come with an acceptance that they are going to go wrong at points.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter how much practice you do or anything like that.
Yeah.
You're going to do around 100 live pit stops throughout the year. So, you think about 16, 18 people over 100 different events, all of which the circumstances are going to be slightly different.
Yeah.
Pit stops are going to go wrong, right? I always say that if your bad pit stops less than 4 seconds, you've done a great job, because recovering it once it goes wrong is so difficult,
right.
And actually part of the mindset to be good at it is that when it does go wrong is you can't try and make up the time.
Right.
You have to just get back into whatever that rhythm is, and if you do that and you do it well, you come out of there with a 3.5, 4 second stop, and it's not the end of the world, right? Because of that acceptance that they're not all going to go perfectly, I think a good recovery in those sort of situations is probably the primary focus.
Yeah.
But when you then go into your next pit stop, because this is what I always say, like your first pit stop of the day could be a shocker, could be a terrible pit stop.
Yeah.
You might still have 3, 4 more pit stops to do that day.
Yeah.
So the first thing is you don't have time to think about it or dwell on it. You just have to get back into your routine, the things you'll do for the next one. Because,
how much time between pit stops?
Well, it depends. I mean, if it's your first stop of the day, your next driver could be in the next lap.
Oh, shit. Okay, that's right. You have 2 drivers.
This is the thing. So it could be really, really quickly. So there's really no time. That just has to go out of your mind and go back to what you know that you can do. And it is about that knowledge. Like I used to say, probably only in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I managed to get that mentality of every time I stepped out in the pit lane, I had the mentality of I know I'm the best at what I do. So it doesn't matter if I have a bad stop. The next time I step back into the pit lane, the mentality is the same. I know I'm the best at what I do.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you have to share. I say with the whole pit crew, every single one of them has to step out there knowing that they're the best at what they do. And it does not matter. Like a bad pit stop can't knock that belief. Right. It really can't. It has to be ingrained in you.
Is that something that you train and work with,
I think a large part of that comes from the support of your colleagues.
Yeah.
Right? So obviously you work together on the cars, you train together, you do pit stops together, you travel together, it has to be a team belief.
Right. So that just happens organically, just all the repetitions that you're doing together, like you are building that trust and that.
Yeah, that's it. And then obviously when those bad stops do happen, I mean, it's something that I've experienced plenty, in the Red Bull garage. You're going to have a bad stop. You're going to be down about it in your mind. There's going to be a colleague that will come to you and say, don't worry about that.
Yeah, next one.
Let's just do the next one. We'll worry about that tomorrow.
Right.
It's part of that unity thing and a crew that you have like this trust in one another.
Did you have like a heuristic or kind of a shortcut that allows you to kind of go into the next moment? I played for the U.S. national team for like 7 years and for hockey, and my coach would like just like yell at us, and I would just like in my mind like just put up the umbrella and just like let it like bounce off, to like not affect me, so I could actually like play. And another one was like a mistake happened. I just like imagine an easel and like I'm like just flipping the the page. Did you have like anything like that like a heuristic that you kind of fall back on, or
no? I think
words or
what I had was a routine, right?
Yeah.
So even when something's gone badly, I know that come the next pit stop or whatever, I'm going to go and do my routine, and I sort of take comfort, if you like, or, whatever, in the fact that I'm just doing my routine.
Right.
And this pit stop is not going to be the same as the last one.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest part of it. Like I step out into the pit lane, I get to where my wheel gun is, I get on my knees, I clip the gun line in, I toggle it to see that it's going both directions, I look at the lights, make sure they're okay, and then after that, and I'm set in my position, my focus goes down the pit lane, and I'm just waiting for that car to come in. And then once I'm back into that routine, the last pit stop doesn't matter. It doesn't. Yeah. It's done. It really is. It's finished.
I love it. How much do you guys get coaching from like psychologists, sports psychologists? Is that a feature of your training?
We do a little bit of it. Certainly, I think the vast majority of our training, we focus on things like functional fitness.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what
you guys have to be so fit.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
That's what we call it. We call it functional fitness, obviously meaning that to be functional in your role. Now, that can mean anything. That for the roles are also different and the requirements are so different. So people doing wheel off and wheel on, it's about explosive strength, balance, and agility, core strength, all of this stuff. Right. So they will spend time in the gym because those are the things that they need to make sure they're on top of. I think for me doing the wheel gun, I always felt that the biggest challenge was up here rather than my body. I'd been doing pit stops, doing that role for so long. That's muscle memory.
Yeah.
Like I've done it so many times and I don't think about the action and that. I think for me, functional fitness to me was making sure that I woke up that morning on the right side of bed, that my head was in the right space as I got to the garage, and I managed that through routine. Right. So on a Sunday, I always tried to make sure my routine was the same from the beginning of the day. I'd have breakfast. I might go and have a cigarette, and then I
saw in your book. I was like, oh,
yeah. I might go and do that, and then I'll get to my desk and I'll open my emails, and then I'll go through any prep work for the next race, and then my routine for the race started from our pre-race pit stop practice. So we'd have our pre-race pit stop practice, then I'd go and I'd take a minute for myself, and then I'd get my suit on, and then I'd go and sit out in the pit lane. I used to do this thing where I'd just go and sit out on the pit lane before we went to the grid. I'd take in the atmosphere, I'd look up and down. I always still almost feel like I feel like at one with this bit of tarmac, this bit of tarmac that I'm going to go out here and do pit stops on.
I love that.
I like to just take it all in and feel like I'm really comfortable in the space.
Yeah. And
then my routine just went from there, and I feel like that routine was really important for my mindset, But oddly enough, with F1, and all teams try and operate with routine, but it's never that simple, right? There can be race weekends where problems pop up on a Sunday morning and you have to divert from that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, and we always used to say this as well, we used to say that the weeks where, for whatever reason, one reason or another, we hadn't managed to get all of our normal practices in, or things hadn't gone well, 90% of the time, those weekends, you'd get to Sunday and they'd be our best pit stops of the season.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes just that little bit of chaos and adrenaline can actually really help your mindset.
Yeah, 100%.
Especially if I was pissed off about something, right? Yeah. So if I was pissed off about something, those are going to be my best performances. Because I almost went out there and be like, right, I'm going to show you.
Yeah. There is that phenomenon exists, in sports, and it's, this kind of overcompensation. I
feel like the Ryder Cup was a great example.
Such a good example. Yeah. It's a perfect example, actually. But our physiology is sensitive to routines, right? And it can serve us, but it could also mute us.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're the thread you're pulling on, and it's understanding, okay, how do I get myself a little bit worked up?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of performance too. The one thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm curious because this is just my life's work, is in this space of really understanding, how do we show up and perform? What do you see to be the biggest difference maker? For you, it was your routine. But when you look across kind of motorsport, the guys and gals who really rise to the top, what's the red line? What's the through line?
I mean, I think, like you say, downtime is a huge factor.
Right.
Certainly as the calendars have expanded. I mean, one of the things that we talk about functional fitness is not necessarily about finding extra performance. It's more about things like preventing injury. Preventing professional burnout. And that downtime is so important for it. At the same time, I think the biggest thing, and I think this is something that just sort of flows through F1 as a whole, in any role, not just in pit crews and whatever, but in any role, I always say the people that have like long and fruitful careers in F1 are the people that just love it. Like it's an absolute requirement. When people say, oh, what do I need to work in F1? My most important requirement is that you love racing. Right? If you don't just love it, you're probably not going to do it for that long. Even if you get to where you think your goals are and this, that, and the other, you're going to quickly discover that without loving it, there's way better things you could do with your skill set in a sense. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things. And then, it attracts natural competitors. Right. So
I know you hate to lose. You're a sore loser.
Well, this is it. I'm a sore loser. Pretty much everybody I've ever worked with in this sport is a sore loser. And that, okay, in life, that's probably not one of the most, wanted things to be known as. But in a situation like Formula One, like there's a Mike Skinner lyric that I really love, right? Mike Skinner, The Streets, and there's a lyric of his that says, "Show me a good loser, and I'll show you a loser." Right? And this is one of my biggest things. Like fine, I've learned that I'm not going to win every time, but I'm not going to be happy about it either.
Yeah. Totally. That's same. I think anyone who's competed at a high level, like is you'll see that that's true. It's just. It just like grates at your soul. I
think that's the biggest thing for me. I think that, we have such an environment of people that will do whatever it takes to win. And it's one of those things that you can't teach. Like you can't, I can teach anyone to build a race car. I can teach anyone to do pit stops with enough hours, right? I can't teach you to have that mentality.
What is it like to work with Max?
I think Max is very special in that I've worked with a lot of great drivers. I don't think I've ever met somebody that's so like driven, right? Especially like racing. I think, Max is like one of us, loves racing. But I think what was special about him is that, and especially in, 2021, 22, 23, we saw Max get the best out of us, right? When you've got a guy that if you give him the equipment and you do your job well, he's going to deliver. Right.
And the goosebumps. Yeah, that's cool.
And just in that, like, it's almost a scary thing, as I especially remember 2023, when you've won every race. I mean, apart from Singapore, we won't talk about Singapore. But when you're in that thing of winning every race, each race, the pressure builds, right? Because in your role, you don't want to be that person that ends that streak. Right. And whilst we all accept that there are things going to go wrong and nothing's going to go perfect, you just don't want it to be you, right? But also, I think just in the garage, like what he created in the garage in terms of the atmosphere and the drive among all of us to do absolutely whatever it took to win. Like that's really special. That's what always stood out to me about Max was, I think his skills, his talent, that kind of stuff speaks for itself. But that mentality and the way it rubs off on everybody else around you, that's always what I'll say makes Max a little bit special.
And you won the World Championship in 2021.
2021, we made hard work of it, and
What was the thing that stands out to you? Like that's the big highlight.
I often say that actually 2021, as amazing it was, like for me, obviously Max's first World Drivers' Championship, my first any championship, World Drivers' Championship. I feel like at the end of it all was the bit, actually, I always say the first feeling was relief. I talk about it being like a really stressful season. And I think there were points at it. There were points in that year where it looked like as a team, we were going to walk away with both the drivers and constructors championships. It was going to be, not smooth sailing, is always going to be a battle, but, I don't think any of us at points in that season saw it coming down to that last race and all the pressure that came with it. So, and I talk about the last 3 or 4 races, it felt like you were being hunted. We were ahead, but each week we were losing ground, and you it almost felt like they were, just right behind.
I mean, it's easier to chase.
Yeah, for sure. Like you'd always rather be, rather be the predator than the prey, right?
Yeah. Let's watch this clip.
championship can only be won by one.
Like immediately goosebumps. Where every time I see this footage,
For the first time ever.
and when I see, like, even from earlier on in this clip, when I see my colleagues in the garage and all of us stood in there, it's like it was something else.
Yeah.
It was very much a feeling that it took me a minute to like soak it all in.
Yeah.
Like I talk about in my book how, from my perspective, what happened, but then like after this, all the commotion of him crossing the line, and as things started to sort of quiet down in the pit lane, but then we knew there was this war going on in the steward's office, and I remember going and sitting on that pit wall in this really like eerily quiet pit lane, and I just sat there for a moment on myself, and I was like, what just happened? You know, like that.
When you think about sport, and, you know, if you were to poll everyone who's played sports to end a season with a W,
it's this
0.001% of the population, right? Like to really, if you really think about what it means to end the season
for sure
with a victory.
Yeah. It's so tough, and especially one that I got to be honest, throughout that entire race in Abu Dhabi, I didn't see coming.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not really like one to give up.
Yeah.
But, you know, there was a point in that race in Abu Dhabi where I knew we'd done all we could.
Yeah.
You know, but it didn't look like we were going to be able to achieve it.
Yeah.
So to go from that to like the elation, literally like 5 laps later, all of a sudden we've achieved it all.
And what was just explain kind of the trajectory of that race, the arc of that race?
So, well, yeah, I mean, you know, we had a good down Saturday, put it on pole.
So just for listeners who might not, and viewers, it's 3 days.
Yeah. So we had practice on Friday.
Right.
We qualified on Saturday in what we knew was going to be a tough qualifying. You know, at that point in the season, the last race, I think the development of the cars had swung in Mercedes' favour.
And this is Lewis Hamilton.
This is Lewis. Obviously, Lewis is Lewis as well. And then I think we were like elated, but a little bit shocked that Max put it on pole. On the, so you knew he'd start the race first, and probably a little bit against the odds on the Saturday. And traditionally, we always have team drinks, right? So we always have like a team barbecue in Abu Dhabi on the Saturday night after qualifying. Okay. And we've always done it for years and years, and it was quite a quiet affair for once.
Yeah.
Red Bull affairs are very rarely quiet, but I remember it being quite sort of sedate and event, and pretty much I think everybody got an early night that night, right? We were all so like, wow, we've got a real opportunity here. And then we got a terrible start of the race, you know, lost the position, and then it just wasn't going our way. You know, we didn't have the pace. And we got to about lap 40 odd. I was doing this thing that Jonathan Wheatley always told us not to do, which is go out the back of the garage and have a cigarette during the race.
I read that in your book.
Yeah, for sure. But the thing is, you're not too panicked, because like most of the time you'd be out the back of the garage. I can see the screens of hospitality, so I know what's going on. And I've got my radio in. But I was sat there and I was talking to one of my colleagues, and I was just like, Steve, I can't believe we've blown it. You know, and Steve, being ever optimistic, was there saying to me, "Oh, you never know what could happen, mate." And I'm like, "Nah, there's no way, man. There's no way we've messed this up." And I sort of walked dejected back into the garage, and I got halfway down the corridor, and then all of a sudden I can see all this commotion going on in the garage. So I quickened my step and got in the garage, and as I got into the garage, I saw that there was yellow flags out, and then the camera panned to Latifi in the wall. And then my next thought was, where the fuck is my pit stop helmet? Right? Because I'd put it down to go outside, and you can't do a pit stop without a helmet. You get a penalty if you did it. So then I knew that the next call was going to be that we would pit stop. As soon as I saw Latifi in the wall, I knew it would be a safety car. And then I knew that we would pit stop under that safety.
Okay, so they had to slow the race down.
Yeah.
So the safety car comes
out,
down.
And it's very common for teams to pit stop under a safety car anyway, because you save time. Because everybody else on the track is going slowly.
Right.
It's better to pit stop now. But also when you're not in the lead.
Right.
Pit stopping is often the best choice, because you get fresh tires and the leader won't pit. And that's essentially what happened. But so I get back in the garage, and now I'm in full panic mode trying to find my helmet. And literally as I found my helmet and picked it up, I got that call from Jonathan Wheatley saying pit stop imminent. And then before you know it, it's 15 seconds. And that's your warning. You know, so from the time that you get that notification, you've got 15 seconds and the car is going to be there.
Yeah.
So I'm like, got my helmet on, get out. It's the pit lane, trying to clip my line in. I'm like, what is going on here?
I'm so stressed for you.
And then those, because we did a double pit stop, so we pitted both cars, and then I don't remember how those pit stops went at all. I've seen the video and they
blackout. Like,
yeah. Like I've seen the video and I know they're fine. And also a safety car stop does take a little bit of the pressure off anyway. But I don't remember that. That was all a blur. And then the next thing I knew, I was back in the garage just screaming at the TVs with all my colleagues going, come on, let's get this race going again. And then, and it all just sort of unfolded. It was all a bit surreal.
you win. What happened? It's one of those things where, when you've won championships, like you kind of like the next day feels kind of like so anticlimactic, and then you realize that the things that you remember aren't actually the actual win, but then just the times on the bus together, or that, you start to like recall like
no, for sure.
Many moments.
There's some really funny moments that I remember. Like I remember with my colleagues, by the time, because obviously after a race, the cars are all in parc ferme. So they all go down to the FIA and they get weighed and inspected, and you're just praying that they don't find anything wrong. Yeah. We were confident they weren't going to find anything wrong with the cars. It wasn't necessarily them.
So inspections are happening before and after the race, obviously.
So some cars will get inspected after qualifying, but then post race, like all the cars will be weighed and this, that, and the other.
Wow.
But in that period, which was an elongated period. It was longer than usual anyway, because there was all this drama going up in the steward's office.
Yeah.
So in that period, we did what we always do when we win, and catering brought the crates of beers round, and we just started celebrating in the garage, which meant that by the time the car got back from parc ferme and we had to now strip it apart, like honestly, trying to use tools after like 5 or 6 beers was like really, really difficult. All of my colleagues, I remember like my colleagues have all got like stupid hats on, where everybody is just absolutely nowhere. We're having such a great time. The music's blaring.
Wow.
Obviously it's Rebel Racing, so we had a party afterwards and things like that. And then one of the things that always sticks out in my mind that's really petty but quite funny was that there was a lot of like commentators and people involved with the sport that were like angry at the outcome of this race.
Yeah.
And I remember the following morning going down for breakfast, because unfortunately for us, it wasn't like pack it all up, let's go home as world champions. We had a young driver test post-season. So the following morning at 9 a.m, we're all back in the garage to build a car for this test. Now,
oh my gosh.
I say 9 in the morning. A lot of people didn't rock up until about 1 in the afternoon. But one of the things that I remember was getting up in the morning and going down to breakfast in our hotel. And I was wearing a Max Verstappen world champion t-shirt. And I remember going to breakfast and seeing Damon Hill, pundit at the time, and he was
just maybe some of the Americans.
He was very vocal. I walked into breakfast and I just saw his look of disdain as he saw me, and I was like, well, I'm not going to have that. So I literally sat opposite, like, morning, mate, how are you? Blah, blah, like nice as pie with my Max Verstappen. And that's something that always sticks out with me.
That's amazing.
But then I remember getting to the garage and just looking at the state of my colleagues from the night before.
Oh, just ripped.
Yeah. So the whole thing was just an incredible experience, the whole thing.
A quick message from our sponsor, Whoop. Most of us want to live a long life, but what matters more is living that life well, with energy, clarity, and strength. The feature HealthSpan on Whoop gives you a read of how your body's actually aging based on how you're living, not just your chronological age. By tracking 9 key metrics like sleep consistency, strength training minutes, time and heart rate zones, and VO2 max, it calculates your Whoop age. Then each week it shows you how your behaviors are influencing your pace of aging. So you get clear feedback on how to slow it down. Over 85% of people over 65 are managing at least one chronic condition, but your daily behaviors can shift that trajectory. We built HealthSpan alongside the Buck Institute, a global leader in aging science. So if you're interested and want to try HealthSpan for yourself, head over to join.whoop.com/science to get 1 month free. That's join.whoop.com/science. You know that moment when you're in a hot tub, fully relaxed, then you know what's coming next, the cold plunge. Your body braces for it. That's contrast. And that's the whole point. That's where the Vigor Cold Plunge from our sponsor, Hot Springs Spas, come in. I use it alongside a hot tub to get the full benefits of contrast therapy, also known as hot and cold therapy. It's one of the most effective ways to boost circulation, reduce soreness, and support your nervous system. Heat opens up your blood vessels, cold tightens them. Alternating between the two creates a rhythm of stress and release that trains both your body and your mind to recover faster and respond better. The Vigor is their cold plunge model. It cools all the way down to 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 4 degrees Celsius. Just 3 minutes can elevate your energy, sharpen your focus, and help your muscles bounce back. If you're ready to make contrast therapy part of your routine, head to hotspring.com/Kristen to learn more. When I think about performance and health, and sometimes it's hard for them to coexist. You had mentioned that your mental health really took a hit during that season.
Yeah.
Maybe just talk a little bit about some of that tension.
I mean, I think for me, it was the first time that the sport really had an impact on me, like when I wasn't at work, right? Like when you're at work, you're working on race cars, you're focused on the performance, the winning, all of this other stuff that you've got to do with your role. Right. But I was always really good at having this thing in my mind that each day the garage door closes and tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of data to support that skill is so important for positive psychological functioning, this
is it, because over the course of the season you're gonna fall out with colleagues, you're gonna have bad days, you're gonna have rough days. The only way to get through it is to be able to have that mentality of each day is a new day, close the garage doors, start again tomorrow. But I think 2021 was like the first time that I really struggled to do that. In that you'd get home between races, like the season's grueling anyway.
Oh God.
Right. But I was the first time that I got home in between races, and I might have 5 or 6 days off before I then flew away again. And normally, you fly back from a long haul, you need a day to just adjust and get back on your sleep pattern and this, that, and the other. And then you'd go and enjoy the rest of the days with your family and friends and whatever. And I think it was the first time where I couldn't switch off. I'd come back from those last few races. You'd come back home, things hadn't gone well.
Yeah.
You felt this, constant pressure just mounting and mounting.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that even my partner was like, "Are you okay? Like, are you all right? Do you need to speak to someone?" I just say to her, "Babe, I can't shake the fatigue. I can't shake." It felt like it almost felt like I'd be home for 5 days. It felt like I'd been home for like an hour before I was packing a case and I was on another flight. And then of course you're back into the stresses of that week. So it was certainly the first time that it was really, really tough. I think as a team actually, and I don't know if it was as a result of that, but as a team, we do so much now for employee mental health.
Yeah.
We have mental health first aiders. We have people within the team who you can go and talk to. And these are people that naturally fell into this role anyway. Yeah. So I always used to say, like, our team physio, John, he'd become everyone's sort of agony aunt anyway, because if you're in there having your elbow or your back treated,
just start venting.
You end up, and he was, and and to be fair to him, he's so good at it, just listening and maybe offering, like, not advice, but just sort of offering a perspective and this and that and the other. And it became really important. And it's something that we now implement across the business.
I love that. Yeah.
To have spaces where, you can just go and talk about how things are going.
It's becoming so much more common, which is so beautiful,
Yeah, for sure. It's something that's certainly really important.
Yeah. In the research I do with military operators and frontline healthcare clinicians and professional athletes who travel a lot, it's very clear that, what you have going on is this kind of circadian disruption, with all the travel, right? Like you're up at night, you're, having to sleep during the day sometimes, and I think the other piece that you highlight that I think is so important is that transition back home. Yeah. It's not easy.
No, not always.
It's, because you have to get realigned, and then you're trying to maximize your time with your family and, the ability for you to kind of do all the things that you need to do by yourself to kind of get back to neutral. Yeah. I think sometimes you just don't do it,
having the time as well to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I talk in my book about sort of just having this little moment. Yeah. Where, and it was in Qatar. So, what was that, penultimate race or third race, whatever. And I'd just been so stressed anyway. We'd been away for a long time. I missed my daughter. And it was the morning that Adele's album came out. And I love Adele anyway. So I was like, Friday mornings, like
who doesn't?
Friday mornings, like new music day. I was like, oh, sweet, Adele's out. So I'm getting ready in my nice hotel room and I'm brushing my teeth and My Little Love came on. And I just started listening to My Little Love, and before you know, I'm just stood in the mirror, just bawling, like I just completely had enough. And then, that's another one of those moments, a bit like back with Marussia, with Jules, where you really discover how important your teammates are. You know, like I'd had enough, you know, and I got in the van because I knew I've got to go to work. I got in the van. I said to my teammates, I jokingly said to my teammates, I was like, listen, just don't listen to the Adele album until you get home. Right? Just don't do that to yourselves. And they were like, oh, you're right, Cal. And then it was like a 20-minute drive to the circuit, chatting to my colleagues.
Yeah.
And okay, I didn't feel great again by the time I got to work, but I felt able to function just having these people to lean on a little bit and have these conversations with.
I love that. I think it's just like an important message, you know, for folks just generally, you know, is that like there are just going to be patches of time that just things aren't as good.
And people will surprise you as well. Like, you know, some of the people in the team that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily consider being really connected with their emotions or empathetic. All of a sudden you realize that actually they're some of the best people for you to go to and talk to.
Talk a little bit about the platform that you've built and just talk about diversity in motorsport. You know, it's obviously like, you know, an area that you're super passionate about. And
I tell you what, before I decided I was going to go racing, I was completely like clueless about the lack of diversity within sport.
Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't something that I even realized until I was in the industry.
Yeah.
And then it took me another nearly 10 years to start to understand why the sport was the way it was, right? So when we got to like 2018, 2019, and Netflix was a big part of it, obviously Netflix was just this explosion for the sport.
Yeah.
And
that was my introduction.
So well, this is it. I mean, that's a prime example.
Yeah, I didn't really watch TV, and I was like drawn to it.
Yeah,
like,
and it was this explosive thing. But I think what happened was that people who are watching the show and then started to watch F1, they started to notice the lack of diversity, and then people would then see me on their screens, and they'd be like, "Oh, I want to know who that guy is." So then they find me on social media, and people would ask me questions, and then one of the sort of, well, I think it was the first ever podcast that I did was one called Driven by Diversity.
Oh.
And it was Ariana Bravo, who's now a presenter for Formula One, and Steph Turner, who now does comms for Formula E. And they ran this podcast called Driven by Diversity, where it was just human stories from people within the sport who sort of stood out, you know, if you like, people who weren't sort of part of the rest of the demographic of the sport. And they came and asked me if I'd just talk about my experiences. And I did, and then it seemed like every little bit of media or anything I did, it just brought waves of new followers with questions that they had. So I just started answering people's questions. Yeah. People wanted to know what the schedule was like at a race weekend, so I just let them know. People wanted to know if you got to stay in nice hotels or if you had to pay for your own travel. And they were just all really simple questions. And it sort of occurred to me that...
You kind of take for granted that people just know these things, right?
Well,
people are just totally clueless.
Yeah. And then it sort of occurred to me that these same people that are now contacting me and asking me about this stuff, they'd probably been trying to find out this information from teams and from drivers and from other people in the sport. And like I said, unfortunately, all these big businesses, there's a certain amount of sort of PR protection, and they don't give you that information. So for me, it was one of those things, well, I can give you this information, you know, and then the following grew. So then I did a bit more, and I did a fan Q&A, and then the following grew, and it just grew and grew like that. It felt really organic, you know, in terms of, I didn't feel like I did anything that was particularly different or special. It was just that I was doing stuff that no one else was really doing, you know, like the information just wasn't out there. So then, the book became the next steps. And one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to write the book was because, like, as humans, we're so, like, with social media especially, we treat social media and sort of all media the same way we do everything else as humans. We consume it and we move on to the next thing, and we consume it and we consume it and we consume it. And I wanted to create something that I felt that in 5, even 10 years, people can look back on and go, actually, this is useful. Right. You know, and I felt like that just doesn't really happen with online content, you know, like, you know, your reel might blow up for a couple of weeks or whatever, and then before you know it, it's lost.
Context around that moment,
exactly.
You know, like that's...
Exactly. So it was one of those things I was like, well, you know, if people want this information, I want it to be there and available for people forever, really. That was sort of what led me down the path. And then it was, at first I was really annoyed. Like when I first started growing this social media following, I didn't like the idea that I was getting this attention purely because of what I look like, right? Purely because of my ethnicity. It kind of bugged me. A, because everybody I was working with, in not just in that garage, but up and down the paddock, they're all doing the same work. They're all extremely skilled people.
Yeah.
It felt a little bit unjust that I was getting this attention, you know, for no other reason other than how I looked.
Yeah.
So that annoyed me a little bit. And then what annoyed me a little bit was, at first it kind of felt like the sport were quite happy to use my image to make the sport seem more diverse than it was.
Yeah.
Because then you always have that people who go, oh, well, Calum's super successful. It can't be lacking in diversity. Right. And I hated that as well. And then it was my dad, actually. It was my dad that sort of changed my perspective.
Yeah.
He sort of said to me, look, Cal, I get why you're annoyed, but you have to look at it as an opportunity. You know, you can be part of the change that in 10, 15 years time, there are a load of people who saw you doing something and went, I can go and do that.
Yeah.
You know, just like I did all those years ago. I saw those mechanics in the British Grand Prix and I went, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
You know, the opportunity to be the person that people take that inspiration from. And in the future, the sport is now much more diverse than it was. And then, 2020, 2021, I was like really honored that Lewis Hamilton approached Red Bull and said, I'd really like Calum to come and give a case study for the Hamilton Commission report. So Lewis funded this report that was sort of researched by the Royal Academy for Engineers, looking at what the barriers were. So, you know, just to be asked to be a part of that, I was like super honored. So I did that, and that was part of the process of me understanding, you know, if you have a voice and you can make a difference, you kind of have a responsibility to do it, right? I felt like it'd be really easy for me to say, oh, well, look, I figured it out. You'll all just have to then figure it out for yourselves. But you don't really get any satisfaction from that.
Yeah.
So it was really nice for me to be able to like make a difference.
Do you find everyone is really supportive, or are those people who just...
I think I think especially now, I think people understand it. I think at first there were plenty of people throughout the sport who were a little bit put out by the fact that I was garnering this attention that they felt I probably didn't deserve. They didn't know that I kind of felt the same way. Yeah. You know what I mean? They didn't know that I kind of felt the same way about it at the time as well. But look, for the most part, especially within my own garage and my colleagues, like I've always been like very open about how I feel about stuff. I'll talk about anything with them, especially. So I think there was always a really good understanding of why I was doing what I was doing, how important it was. And as a result of that, most of my team were like super supportive.
Yeah. The way you approach it is just is with so much humility and authenticity that I feel like if people just spend a second running to you, I think that you can bring people's defenses down.
I feel like I just like, look, I always think of this thing of like, I just want to live.
Yeah.
And, you know, I need my life to be okay. But for the most part, I've never really cared about things like earning money, other than that I need to survive and support my family. That's my job. Right. But other than that, like I've always said that, like, actually looking back to say that I've contributed in a different way is probably more important.
Yeah.
You know, and I say this about Lewis Hamilton as well. Like Lewis Hamilton, his on-track achievements will always speak for themselves, right? His talent, his skill, all the things that he's done. But my greatest, like the thing that I look at Lewis at and say that you are great for this is all of the stuff that he does off track.
Yeah.
You know, things like Mission 44, you know, that Hamilton Commission report, the fact that the sport is way more diverse now than it was 5 years ago is because Lewis used his platform, you know. So for me, when I look at him as an athlete, there's not much to discuss. He's Lewis Hamilton, right? But when I look at him as a person and I say that these are all things that he stuck his neck out for.
And that's his legacy.
And that's for me, that's the most important part of his legacy, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's beautifully said. I wanted to talk about women in F1 as well. You know, I straddle a few different worlds, but definitely in the physiology technology side, you know, I joined a company, there were 2 women, you know, and, you know, like it, you know, I'm very often the only female in the room. Yeah. So I can appreciate a little bit how, you know, what it's like to be kind of underrepresented in a field. So, you know, I think folks of color, absolutely, you know, and then women, you know, you look at a pit crew and it's just all dudes, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And the barriers are so different.
They are different, right?
Oh my God.
They're so different, right? So maybe just unpack that a little bit for, you know, if my biosex is female, like how do I get into F1 and what kind of roles are there for women?
Well, I mean, for starters, all of the roles that exist for women.
Yeah.
Right. I think one of the biggest barriers that we faced for women working in the sport, the first one was the image of the sport. You know, you look at, like you say, you look at pit crews up and down and you see people working in the paddock and all you see is a load of men. it doesn't look appealing, right? And I think that was one of the things that came out of the research from the Hamilton Commission report. Here in the UK, actually, we have quite a lot of women who go and study engineering, at university and whatever, with skills that are perfect for Formula One.
Right.
And then you look at how many take those skills into motorsport, and it dwindles off like so severely. And a large part of that was about the image that the sport had, right? And it's perfectly understandable. And then the other thing was that, and I spoke about this in my book, and certainly when I met my partner, the double standards that existed in terms of like what people expected from the behavior of women working in the paddock to the behavior of men working in the paddock, it was such a stark difference, right? And I talk about this in my book when I talk about meeting my partner and us dating in secret for 6 months. And the reason we did that was because her boss at the time probably would have fired her. Right? There would have been no consequences for me, like whatever, I can go and do whatever I want. I'm a bloke working in the paddock. People expect it of me, but for some reason, it's not expected of her to meet someone in the paddock and go and have a relationship with her. And it was just this ridiculous double standard, right? And to an extent, I still think some of those exist, not necessarily in F1, but throughout motorsport for sure. And I often say to people now, like Formula One, in terms of when you look at global motorsport, Formula One is actually now quite diverse compared to the rest of it. You go and look at junior Formula Motorsport and motorsport elsewhere, and actually you go back and look at F1, you go, actually, this is quite diverse. And obviously we've still got a long way to go in our sport, but it's, there's things like geographical barriers that you never think of, that they can affect anyone. Socioeconomic barriers. When I decided that I was going to go and take on a role in motorsport, I essentially worked for free for like 6 months. I lived out of my car, driving from racetrack to racetrack. And the only reason I was able to do that was because my parents were able to support me financially while I went and did that, and for so many people in the UK, that's not an option. So I often talk about, geography and, socioeconomic factors being big barriers. I think, implicit bias for women is still a big problem. And that has improved, but probably not as much as it's improved. Like implicit bias has probably improved for like people of color more than it has for women in the sport. But it has improved. I once worked for a chief mechanic many, many years ago now. I once worked for a chief mechanic where we were having a discussion in that, why don't you hire any female mechanics? And he said to me, oh, well, if I hire a female mechanic, then when we go away, she's got to have her own room. So it's cost. Right. At which point we said, well, just hire 2 then. And it's like little things like that, that you never expect to be a barrier, but they were at the time. And I'd like to think that
it's just utter nonsense when you think about how much money is around.
So I'd like to think that we're past most of those things. But in terms of, probably what is the biggest barrier still for us is just turning the image around and letting women know that we want you in these roles. If you get the skills for these roles, we want you in these roles. Like ultimately, especially in modern Formula One, right? So like one of the things that I hated, and it's probably the one thing that you can annoy me with if you decide to tweet me, is that you can talk about, oh, that person's just there as part of a quota. Right? Because I can tell you now, in Formula One, there is no space for that.
It's ruthless.
It's been ruthless anyway, where you've always wanted the right person for the job. But now, in modern Formula One, when all these teams are operating under a cost cap, where you have to make sure that every salary is the right person for the right role, there's just no room for it. So when you see people working in Formula One, they're there because they deserve to be there, right? They don't think for 1 second that a team is going to go and spend whatever 50, 60, 70k salary just to fill a quota. They're not going to do it.
I love that.
Right? Everybody that you see working in that paddock, they've earned their right to be there, and they're the best person for that job. So that's part of, like I say, that's part of this image that we need to just sort of get past and let people know that if you've got the skills and you're the best person for that job, there's a role for you here.
Yeah, I love that. I do, from what I see from the data, it looks like 40%, this was in 2022, 40% of global F1 fans were women.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of women watching, F1, which is super cool. And I think Drive to Survive definitely had a big impact on that, certainly.
Absolutely. Like I know there are always going to be the sort of naysayers that say that it's changed the sport and that fandom in the sport is a bit different. Look, it grew the sport into something way greater than what it was. Like I often describe, before Liberty Media bought F1, I often describe it as like, it was like Bernie Ecclestone was trying to keep the whole thing a secret. You know, and paddocks were like these elitist places where it was all just Bernie's old mates that got to come in, and the media was even more controlled. There were no content creators in paddocks in Formula One and stuff like that. And Netflix certainly changed that. The sort of liberties, their way of doing things and what they wanted from the sport has been a huge part of that growth.
Yeah. I mean, I think that golf has done a great job, of making the sport more inclusive. Really, for sure.
Golf was something, when I first started it, I found it to be like this massively elitist thing. Like, I started playing golf about 8 years ago now, right?
Yeah, the country club vibe.
Mate, honestly, I'd walk into golf clubs, especially when we were abroad traveling for F1. We'd get to play some nice golf courses.
Yeah.
We'd play at places that you'd never normally get to play at. And we used to cheat sometimes. All we'd do is we'd email the golf course from our Red Bull email accounts. And then they'd see Red Bull and they'd be like, yeah, sure, come and play. And then you'd rock up at like this really like exclusive country club, and you'd walk in and just everyone would be staring at me. And it was like this massive thing. So it's a prime example of how a sport needs to really evolve. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know. The barrier to entry is significant. These clubs, longer club, is expensive.
Yeah, and certainly F1, when you talk about race drivers, money is the biggest divider.
Yeah.
Right. When and a lot of people ask me about, when do you think we'll see our first female F1 driver?
Yeah.
And I say that, the money's going to be the biggest factor. But what you have to remember is that for the last 75 years, or at least for the last 70 of them, the sport has only been trying to find male race drivers.
Right.
So that part...
They're not even in the development pipeline.
Exactly. That development pipeline is so deep for male drivers. And this is what we're trying to build now, and it will take time. And I know it's painful at times being patient.
Yeah.
But I always say that, lasting change doesn't happen overnight. It was something that people asked me a lot about, diversity of ethnicity.
Yeah.
And I used to say to people, I could go and hire a load of, people of color to do these roles. But if you haven't fixed the barriers, then that only lasts for 5-10 years before they go and do other jobs. And then we're back at square one.
Yeah.
In fact, I say we're worse off because we've been pretending the problem doesn't exist, right? And it's the same with female drivers in F1. We have to develop the pathway so that when we get there, it's right.
Right.
Like just putting a plaster over it and saying, that doesn't work long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see that the result, I think, of these pipelines, where you have, as Premier League is a good example, just the infrastructure, where you've got academies now that are, just as robust for women as they are for men. And, it's just opportunity,
Absolutely.
To grow and develop and learn and
this is it,
get more participation.
And it's hard to be patient when you know that something is not right and you want it to be right. It's really hard to be patient, but it's so important to do it properly.
Yeah, it is. And it takes some investment, but
it does.
I think recognizing that the long-term game is...
Unfortunately, sometimes, and I often say this whenever I talk about D&I, I say that there's always two ways that I'd pitch it to a business. This is how I always think of it. I think firstly, there's the humanitarian reason.
Right.
I think we can all sit here and agree that everybody should be able to have the same opportunities. Right. Whether they take those or not is down to them. But I think we can all agree that just making sure that everybody has the opportunity is just the right thing to do. But then the business argument is probably the stronger one.
Without a doubt.
The business, and it sounds heartless or whatever to say, we do this because it increases productivity or whatever. But unfortunately, that's how you have to pitch it. Profit-seeking enterprises, you have to show them how it's gonna help them. And I say, with engineering, it's actually a really easy argument to make, right? So, all the studies that show that your background, your upbringing, your socioeconomic status, your education, these are the things that will determine how you solve problems, right? So for us in motor racing, in any engineering, we have a problem, we need a solution. So if you hire a team of people that all come from the same socioeconomic background, the same schools, the same lifestyles, the same environments, the chances are that team are all going to come up with the same solutions for that problem because that's what's ingrained into you.
Yeah.
Whereas if I hire a diverse team of people from different backgrounds and different educations, I'm going to have this many options to solve my problem, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately in Formula One or in any racing, solving that problem is speed.
Yeah.
And that speed is money in the long run.
We just need to pause there. That was so damn good.
But that's how I always pitch it. I say, look, do you want the heartfelt answer or do you want the business answer? And that's it. The result is the same.
I love it. Okay, let's talk about the 2026 season.
Next year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So February. So there's a lot happening.
It's a big change.
Talk about Cadillac.
I think it's exciting to see a new team on the grid, for starters. I think for a long time, especially for US fans,
Yeah.
I understand because, I think when Haas joined, I think there was this expectation that, American fans would flock to this team with it being American. And it didn't really happen, right? And okay, a little bit of that's down to performance, which you expect Cadillac, and it might take a minute, but you expect Cadillac will end up being one of the front running teams, I hope.
Yeah.
But I guess it's super exciting for American audiences to have a real like American team that they can get behind, and I get that. From personal experience, I worked for Graham Loudon at Marussia, so obviously with him taking the reins at Cadillac, I think that's brilliant. He was such a great boss to work for.
Nice.
I remember actually, obviously Marussia were in administration when I was looking for a new job, and I remember Graham calling me up, like it was like December 2014. And saying to me, Calum, we're trying to get the team back together as manna for next year. Would you be on board with it?
Yeah.
And I said to him, Graham, I've literally just been offered a job at Red Bull Racing. And he's such a good guy that he said to me, you know what, Cal, take that job. He was like that. He's like, that's going to be great for you.
Yeah.
I think to work for a person that's that kind of person is
that
really
cares
great.
about you, just a human
for sure.
being. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So they're off to a good start.
Yeah. And Checo and Bottas, like you feel good.
For sure,
drivers.
absolutely. I think it's a great base for them to start with. I think experience was definitely the right way for them to go.
Yeah.
I get there must have been a great temptation to try and find like a US driver or whatever, but when you're trying to build something,
you need
that experience is going to be invaluable to them.
Right. So what was it like working with Sergio Perez or Checo?
Yeah. I mean, do you know what? One of the things that I always think about was it's probably one of the times being out with Checo in Mexico where it sort of dawned on me just how much these drivers have to deal with. Like, honestly, I think Checo goes to Mexico and he's more popular than Jesus.
That's
right.
Bad.
Like it's insane. I think that was a bit of an eye opener for me, but he's a great guy to work with. We've played a fair amount of golf. Thankfully I've come out on top, which is
Love that.
Very, very, very important. Okay. But no, Checo was great to work with. I think he's one of those people that like, even on the bad days, he was a bloke that really just gave it everything.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of driver that Cadillac are getting.
Yeah.
They're getting someone with a wealth of experience. He's seen the good, the bad.
Yeah.
He's experienced going up against someone like Max Verstappen, which in itself is a huge thing.
Yeah, that's going to be so intimidating.
And
they have to work through.
They've got two drivers like that. They've got Valtteri, who went up against Lewis Hamilton in his absolute prime.
Wow.
And then they've got Checo, who's gone up against Max Verstappen, and I think both of them will have a resilience that will be really important to the team, right? Because as I said, they're going into a new era, new engines, new regs.
Yeah.
As a first timer in the sport as well.
Yeah.
There's going to be times where it's a really steep learning curve for them. So to have two of those drivers who are super resilient and very, very experienced could be really important for them.
So rule changes. I would love to can I get your
can.
take on that? Yeah. Maybe just explain what are the big rule changes and why are they significant and what kind of struggles do you see, inherent in some of these changes?
I mean, the biggest change next year, I guess, is for the power units.
Okay.
We're losing what was a key part of these power units in the MGUH.
Okay.
I think that's partly because manufacturers and enticing manufacturers into the sport, bringing that cost down for production is really important. But I guess the biggest change is that in terms of the power unit next year is that the amount of power you have is 50-50, essentially. 50% of it comes from the internal combustion engine and the rest of it comes from the electrical power and storage that you have in the batteries. So the batteries get a little bit bigger next year.
Heavier.
Well, the cars in themselves are getting actually a little bit smaller and lighter, because one of the biggest problems we have now, certainly at particular circuits, is that the race cars are too big to race, on the smaller winding circuits. And I think some of the racing suffered as a result. So the idea was to make the cars a little bit shorter, a little bit narrower, a little bit lighter, more drivable.
Okay.
And then the other big change that we have next year is active aero. So at the moment we have the DRS system. So when you're within a second of the car in front in a race situation, you can open the rear wing It opens a nice slot in the rear wing and you lose all your rear downforce, but it means you go faster on the straights.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So DRS in itself is sort of gone next year, but what we have instead is like a two.
So that functionality doesn't exist anymore.
It will, but in a different way. So next year what we will have is we will have rear wings that will be active aero, so they can move into different modes. But we also now next year we'll have that on the front wings as well. So drivers can there'll be X mode and Y mode. I think we're calling. I think we're kind of waiting.
So this just changes the strategy.
Yeah, I mean it will change. It will change
driver thinks about
how he makes a move and things like that. Yeah, absolutely. It changes that a lot. It's a big change, like it's
That seems significant to me. I don't know.
It is. I think the sport needed to do something for the product itself.
Yeah.
There are certain circuits where people moan that it is just a procession.
Yeah.
And I think also with the current aero regulations, the idea of these ground effect cars was that you'd still be able to follow the car in front without damaging your tires.
Right.
I think realistically, as aero design groups have got better and better at extracting the most out of that, we've lost a little bit of that, and following cars is still a little bit difficult now and things like that. And so going to what we have is a more flat floor next year.
Okay.
And hopefully it will improve the racing product in places where it's not been as good traditionally. Certainly smaller cars, I think, is important.
Yeah.
It's quite a difficult task from an engineering perspective, because a lot of the size and weight of the Formula One cars that we have now is largely down to how safe they are.
Yeah.
Right. So to find,
that was my second question. I was wondering how this impacts safety at all.
Yeah. So I don't think it will impact safety.
Okay,
I think obviously the FIA will have done all the studies and needed to do what they do, that the cars will be as safe. We just needed to shrink them a little bit, But that is a huge engineering challenge, to still have the sort of same crumple zones and things that you need in the event of a crash. So yes, it's a big engineering challenge. I think for the teams, it's going to be interesting. I think, I always say that when you have a huge regulation change like this, it's never going to be smooth sailing for anyone.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think I know when we changed, we had offsides for a really long time in hockey, and then we went to no offsides.
Oh, wow.
Which is imagine soccer.
They should do that. They should do that in ice hockey. I like that even better.
Yeah, no, I know. I know. But it totally changed. But I was like, I love this, because I knew that I would have an advantage of thinking about the tactics of what that actually means and how to be creative. Like now, all of a sudden, you have unlimited substitutions. So now you have light change and just the ability to introduce different types of technology. And I was like, so I think from my vantage point, I think these rule changes can upset fans sometimes because it changes a little bit. But I think for the growth of the sport and just and also just keeping things interesting, right? And having to change up strategy potentially, or just how you interact with the drivers. It brings a different level of complexity that I think is what makes it interesting, and new things for commentators to talk about. And, it keeps the sport fresh, right?
Absolutely. I think also as well, I think the upcoming changes, from what I see, especially, I think fans are quite on board. I think for the most part, I feel like pretty much anyone who's watched F1 for a period of time will admit that we did need to make some change and make the cars a little bit smaller. And like you say, the active aero does add a new sense of what you can do and here and there.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think it's really exciting anyway. I think when you get something that's going to change so drastically, it's going to throw up things that you never expected.
Yeah.
Exciting time next year.
I love it. So when you think about these rule changes, are there any teams that you think will struggle?
It's hard to say with such a big change that any one particular team might struggle with the challenge in front of them.
Right.
Some teams have greater challenges than others. The engine manufacturers, the people who are making that own engine, obviously they have that as a brand new engine as a challenge, plus the aero reg changes. The teams that are essentially customer teams who will take an engine from another team, they are at the mercy of the performance of that engine, but at least that they don't have to, they haven't had to pour resources and time into actually making that work. So perhaps their challenge is slightly easier. And I think, when you look at Red Bull, and I wrote this in my book, Red Bull for the first time in their history as a business, they're going to be building their own engine, in collaboration with Ford.
Wow.
It's a huge undertaking to go against, seasoned car manufacturers in Mercedes, Ferrari, Audi. You're going up against these seasoned brands.
Ford, let's go.
For the first time, we'll be creating our own engine. So we're certainly, I'd say, the underdogs of the big teams. But I also say that, if there's an outfit out there that can be in that real position of being an underdog and come out on top, I can't see any other outfit being able to achieve that other than Red Bull. Like, we've broken boundaries so many times. When Red Bull arrived in this sport, people said that we wouldn't be around for long. That we're a fizzy drinks company, that we wouldn't be around for long. Red Bull Racing has changed the sport of Formula One, not just in terms of the on-track performances, but in terms of the media and the scope of it all.
I mean, Red Bull just generally, when I think of Red Bull, I don't even think about the drink, I think about innovation.
Yeah, this is it, So I think whilst we've taken on this huge...
So they've done a good job, I think, of separating themselves from the fizzy drink, They're still the fizzy drink,
we have taken on this huge challenge, and it's been incredible to see that project grow, honestly, to see from when Red Bull Powertrains was first, founded on campus, and see them build all the infrastructure and, them go through the process of design and manufacturing and developing an engine. It's been incredible to see. It poses a huge challenge, but it's not a challenge that anybody's scared of. I think for the other teams, I think, you expect teams like Mercedes to be in probably the best position. But who knows, It's one of those things. For us in the factory, all we can do is hit our own targets, right? All you can do is hit your own targets, know that you're doing a good job of what you're doing. And then we'll get to pre-season testing. And really, you won't find out until qualifying of race 1 where all your competitors are at. So it's exciting, right?
I cannot wait to see how this all plays out.
No, this is it.
There's not many sports with this level of drama.
No, for sure. I think it's, and I know it's sort of, sometimes it's exaggerated, but this is a huge change for the sport and everybody working in it. Not just for the cars themselves, but you got to remember that all of the things that those people working in the garage, the engineers, the mechanics, technicians, all of their working days will change. The way that these cars will operate will change everything for them as well. So it's not just the physical car, it's all the processes, procedures and it'll be the team that does the best job of sorting all that out that will come out on top.
It's wild.
We'll see. Exciting times.
Well, just to kind of, end the conversation, is there anything that, as you think about your kind of new mission, that you're embarking on, which is so exciting, is there anything that you'd want, listeners to kind of, pay attention to specifically, or anything that you want them to follow? Obviously, reading your book.
Always.
Of course, which is
always happy to sell some more books.
And as someone who is I know very little about F1 really, but I found your introduction just pulled me in.
Yeah.
So well done, because that is hard to write an introduction.
It was tough.
Wait, did you write it at the end or at the end, right, or the beginning?
Actually, no. I think that the first chapter of the book I wrote was The Art of the Pit Stop.
Okay. Isn't it funny how, because just finishing a book, I wrote chapter 7 first, I think. And what is now chapter 7? It's kind of funny how...
Well, it was an interesting one, because obviously having never written a book like that before, it was one of those things where I was like, okay, well, these are the things that I know about in the sport, and these are the things I want to write about. And I wanted to do all of the content. I wanted to actually write the book myself, but my editor was incredible of helping me with structure. Right. So I think one of the first things I wrote was The Art of the Pit Stop, because I knew it so well. So it was easy for me to just get into the flow of writing. So that's why I chose that one to write first. And I think after that, I then wrote the introduction. Because it was a difficult one. I wanted to structure the book, right? So I didn't want to just write chronologically through a career. I wanted to write about topics that I thought were important, but also I felt like, for the opening of the book and giving some background on myself, there was going to be a bit that needed to sort of be chronological. So to write the opening starting with 2021 and it's sort of ending with that line, well, how did I get here? It felt natural and it felt nice. I had someone message me actually not long ago saying that I bought your book and then I read the first page and I was so angry about Abu Dhabi 2021 that I didn't read it. And then someone convinced me to read the rest of it and I was so glad that I did. And I was like, come on, man, you gave up after one page.
I love it. I know. I kind of worry. I'm like, do people even read books anymore?
But no, it's been really good.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I think the thing for me is that I think the overarching thing of what I do now is that I want people who would never have considered it to realize that if you're keen, there's a career in motorsport for you, and it doesn't matter what you do. Like I say to people, it doesn't matter what you're passionate about or you do right now.
Yeah.
The sport has grown so much that your skills will be applicable to a role that we have.
I love it.
So I think that's the biggest thing. I think like if you're a lover of the sport and you're thinking about maybe I could go and do that for a living, the chances are you can.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest takeaway.
I love it. So when you think about the next line, you're going to step over across, like what is that for you?
Oh, it's difficult. It's a tough one. I think that I'm really enjoying what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
It's been a big change for me this year, you know, going from spending like 15 years like on the road in a garage to now for the first time in my life, you know, essentially working for myself. You know, I feel really lucky that I've got to stay within the Red Bull family, but you know, I'm a contractor now. So it's a very different dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I feel like I'm finding the time to just really settle in and enjoy this role and see where it might take me. So I've always in the past been someone that sets short-term goals, right?
Yeah.
And then just worry about the bigger picture coming together later. I think at the moment, I feel like my short-term goal is really to just embrace what I'm doing, make it feel comfortable, natural, the way it did for all those years racing, and then see what opportunities come next.
Yeah.
You know, I think for the first time in a long time, I've been in a position where I can say, yeah, if this opportunity comes up, I'm ready to take it.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything that you feel like new that you have to commit to in order to make all of that a reality?
I think the hardest thing actually sometimes, and certainly when I first took on the role, was not feeling like I was missing out, right? So the first thing that happened
So much FOMO, right?
Right.
Like not in it.
That was the first thing, was sort of saying to myself, you're not missing out, you're doing something different and you're enjoying it and it's fine, you know, like you're, you know, but I think certainly when I first started doing all this stuff, there was a lot of like imposter syndrome. You know, like, what am I doing here? Is this really like where I'm meant to be? Or like, do I feel like I fit here? So sort of coming to terms with it and just making myself feel like that this is something that I'm really good at, or something that I'm meant to be doing this. So that's probably where I'm at.
Oh, I love it. A little bit of doubt and uncertainty is
sometimes
it's a good
fine.
sign.
Yeah, sometimes it's fine. I feel like if you know, one of the reasons why I was sort of ready to take on this new role was, you know, having 10 years of just feeling so comfortable doing the same job over again. I think it's nice to feel a little bit anxious sometimes.
It's good for the brain. Change is good for the brain.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to stay comfortable.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
Well, I really appreciate
thank you so much. I've had a great chat. It's been a real pleasure.
You're amazing.
Thank you so much.
Congrats on everything.
And you as well. Like, congrats on your book that's coming.
Oh, thank you.
I wish you all the best.
I appreciate it.
Look forward to reading it.
Yeah, thank you. I absolutely loved talking to Cal. He has had really an incredible journey. I think for anyone who believes they might not belong in a space, this is a really powerful episode that's just not the case. He has had just such an interesting journey into high performance sport. And, you know, I think when I consider, you know, the commitment and kind of sacrifices over the course of the arc of his career, I was really inspired by his path. You know, he had to overcome just a lot of adversity and obstacles throughout his journey. And it's not just, you know, even for yourself, if you're already in the place that you want to be, but if you have, you know, a niece or a nephew or a son or a daughter, or, you know, a mom who's starting over, you know, I just think this idea that we can carve out a space for ourselves that might not be obvious to others, but is speaking to our heart in ways that, you know, might seem strange to people around us. Like, I think we need to follow that intuition. And I think anyone who kind of is in that space or knows of anyone around them, you know, this is a really powerful story.